We are ready and live and hello. Oh, hey, Evolve Fest. Welcome to this next interview in a series that's seemingly never ending. I think we're just going to continue. I want to say it's like a post series or part of it's just going to be the never ending Evolve Fest interview series with me. And today I am joined by KamalaDevi. I am really excited to introduce you to KamalaDevi and especially about the topic that we will be covering today. But a little bit about KamalaDevi. She's a mystic muse and a mentor. She's also pansexual, genderqueer, and an art activist. And she has authored 7 books. That is a lot of labor of love given, and quite a feat. And KamalaDevi was featured on Showtime's reality docu-soap, which ended up being a incredible kind of activist for non-monogamy, and it was called Polyamory, Married and Dating, which I was a part of with her. But she's also been featured on Dr. Drew, Tyra Banks, and the award-winning documentary Sex Magic. Hello, Miss KamalaDevi.
Hi, Rachel. Yeah, so it has been quite a journey and you've been involved in a lot of it. and because it has been a while, I just wanted to update you that I'm my preferred pronouns are they, them, and yeah, so the bio that you have is probably past, an old version, and we're constantly renewing.
Thank you for that reminder. I know, and somehow I was in an unconscious sharing of things, but thank you.
Well, yeah, we know each other so deeply, and oftentimes it's hard. The people who know me the most are the hardest to shift.
Yeah, totally. And when I speak about you, and I speak specifically like with someone I know, and I'm speaking about a past, then it also brings me to them in the past rather than the current updated. That happens a lot with people who I'm friends with who change their name. And then when I speak about the past, I'm all of a sudden referring to them as the past name instead of the current new changed name. So anyway, here we are.
Yeah, we are in the present, and we share a ton of past. And this topic of metamors is actually one of the I think topics on which we were both schooled the most through our relationship with each other. So it feels really really rich, and to share it with the world, to say, hey, let's evolve this conversation with each other and with the festival.
Yeah, there's a lot to share here, a lot of richness. And I was just thinking back this morning to our relationship and the relationships I've had since then. I don't think I've ever had a metamor that was quite as deep and profound as you. And it continues to be quite a sore, achy spot for me in my trials and tribulations of non-monogamy. And I'd love to start out. You have a beautiful way of all encompassing the kind of definition for people to understand what a metamor is. I even tried looking today to look up in Google, and every time I kept pressing like define metamor, it kept typing like metamorphosis or metaphor. Like I got the definition for metaphor a few times. Like it doesn't even really pop up in Google as a word.
Yeah, it is. I would say in the same way that compersion is almost like in the context of ethical non-monogamy, metamor is often, there's no real use for it in mainstream other than maybe sister wife, or, there's other types of cultures that have different terms. But essentially what we're talking about is, sharing, loving. How do you, love and relate to those that are sharing lovers? So there's a whole range here. It could be as simple as when somebody's just dating a lot of people and they're dating two different people, how do they relate? Or it could be like in the example of sister wives, where you're like deeply in a communal setting, you're sharing your life together. I mean, a perfect extreme example is on that fabulous movie, the Wonder Woman. The Marston, what's the title of that? The story of the author of Wonder Woman was married, to two beloveds who, after he passed on and he raised kids with them, they continued to live together and raise a family together. And that's a beautiful example of metamors that are, deeply life devoted. So I just wanted to say that it could be a whole continuum of someone you perhaps don't even know to someone you're, so intimately connected with that you're co-parenting with. And, the intention in this call, I think, is to see wherever you are, like how to upgrade, your relationship to your lover's lovers.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Did you see that Marston movie?
I didn't. I was trying to connect to it, but I admittedly didn't see it.
It's like my favorite poly movie.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, then I have to see it. The new Wonder Woman.
No, I'm going to look it up, but it's the story of the author.
Okay.
The person who created Wonder Woman was actually created her as a fusion of his two beloveds. So she is like the superwoman who is the two women that he loved put together in one character. And he, by the way, is also the person who created the lie detector. So there's something there, because polyamory is all about being honest, and like Wonder Woman's lasso of truth is actually related to the lie detector. And somebody who practiced transparency in their lifestyle.
That's fascinating. I love the fun facts and the knowledge that you have, especially when it comes to like characters and storylines and theater. You have a lot of wisdom stored there. So I think where I want to start today is with actually a question that I was asked recently by a dear friend who's just started doing non-monogamy, and her beloved was with another woman for the weekend, and she had all these feelings come up, and then in the aftermath I was kind of talking with her and sharing, and I said, what would your biggest question right now be? And she said, how do I take my first step towards connecting to this woman? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really beautiful place to start out, because I think that might be how many metamor relationships start out, is that there's a dual connection or a V connection to one person in a love relationship. And that is often the question, like, do I connect, and how? And does that person want to connect with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would back up, and before connecting to my lover's lovers, I'd look at what is, it's first like a connection to self, like how do I like to relate, and letting your lover, first know, hey, this is my orientation or my inclination, and I say this because there's no set of assumptions about how those other relationships should look. So we live in a default world where the standard narrative is has a lot of scripts for what it looks like to be, dating, and then more in serious relationship, and what exclusivity looks like, and then what, marriage looks like. There's a lot of scripts and expectations, but there's almost nothing standard for how you're to relate to multiple other partners. So when you come into a poly world, there might be a fantasy or an expectation that we all sit around a kitchen table and share, and everybody knows everybody. And that might be one version of a alternative, but another version is don't ask, don't tell, and I need my total sovereignty and I need my privacy. And so what's most important is like when you look at, oh, what do I want? What would I ideally want? Which is what you kind of asked, ideally, what would you do? And then talking to your beloved and really getting a sense of their orientation and openness to it. Because I've personally made the mistake of having an orientation towards kitchen table poly and then had a deep weekend encounter with a beloved and then reached out to his wife to thank her, for for the weekend, to which she was absolutely livid that I'd reach out and breach their don't ask, don't tell, agreement. And then he was upset and it was a big dramatic disaster. And my intention was really to create more communion and connection. And I failed on a massive scale, right? Because I didn't actually first go to my partner and say, how do you feel about me reaching out to your wife? And yeah, so it's really important that if you know how you like to relate, that you let your partner know and you see if there's alignment there, and that you're reaching out to them in kind of from a place of alignment as opposed to despite them. And then, yeah, the reaching out can look like, hey, I want to, reveal myself or get to know you, or we share this love, or, but there is these subtle things that tend to not work well, which is this idea of like, I was first and I want you to ask me permission. Like these are some of the subtle implications that kind of come from our trigger or upset. Is if your first introduction is, oh, if you're going to be with my partner, then you need to check in with me. Like I'm going to start imposing rules on you. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's not a great first impression, but it's actually something that happens a lot.
So this conversation is it's funny because this is for me what is like the Achilles heel, or like the real sore spot of open relating for me has been both my own experience with metamors and also in the experience of being the hinge, the person at the center of the V, like also navigating like my metamors having a connection. And I'm aware there's such a spectrum of what people want, and each person has their own desires and their own needs and their own ideas. Maybe we can also I would love to just hear a little bit about your personal journey with this topic, and where you were and where you are now, to just get an understanding of potentially the spectrum and where you found yourself.
Super happy to share, because it has been a immense journey. And I will say this though, this is relevant, for you, the issue has been, in dealing with your lovers, like that has been an ongoing karmic lesson, right? And for some, as you brought up, like it's like being the one who loves two loves, and how do you manage their different expectations? And I think this conversation's super valuable for everyone, because whether it's a triad or it's a whole intimate network, like how do we show up to different people having different needs at different times, and then holding everybody's needs as equal? To be in a kind of a conversation that takes into consideration, those different perspectives. And that's, I think, the key of this conversation, is to say, as soon as I start talking about my personal experience, because I have 20 years experience, it's going to sound like I'm saying, oh, you'll evolve to this place and this is the highest, best practice. And ultimately the best practice is, are you in a relational dynamic where you can express your feelings and needs and have them be held as equal to the feelings and needs of all involved? Like
Mm.
that's what we're striving for. And that's actually something that I continuously, like, I'll just admit that because I'm a mentor and a teacher and have been through the path for 20 years. It's like there'll be a lot of people that will default to my feelings and needs. Oh, like I know better. Or there'll be a way in which I might get righteous and be like, this is how it should be. But truly, like, enlightened relating is, this is what's showing up for me, what's showing up for the other people I'm in relation with, and then how do we find alignment for all of us? And usually that is an evolving conversation, not just, like, here's my bottom lines and this is what we do. It's more like, let me hear from, and then let's see what's in the highest good.
Mm.
So having set that, uber intention, I will say that my, when I first came into polyamory, when I first had, like, I was doing this before there were any ideas of rules or best practices. I was kind of like in love with multiple people and didn't know that polyamory existed. In fact, you know how you said you looked up metamor and metamorphosis came up, or I looked up polyamory and it was polyester, polytechnic. The word polyamory did not exist on the online when I was Googling it, the first time. And that was an ongoing for years. For probably the first 5 years of my marriage with Michael, nobody knew what it was even. So it was a real turning point around the time that the Tyra Banks show happened and people were kind of waking up to this possibility. And so prior to that turning point, there was a lot of fumbling around. And my roots, being Latina and coming from a divorced home where there was a lot of jealousy and competition, like, my lineage felt very threatened by, my lover's other lovers. And I always perceived first, like, the threat first. Am I going to lose my lover? Are they going to take him away? Are they, and then there was a place in which my emotional body would be like all disorganized. And then my consciousness would be like, I want my lover to be free. I want to love them so that they're free. I want them to choose me, not out of obligation. I want them to explore and become fully expressed. And out of that desire being higher than my feeling of threat, I'm going to kind of give that person the benefit of the doubt, be kind, and whatever threat and jealousy and insecurity I have is stuff I have to do on the side, like my work to do so that I can come back to love, so that I can, bless them and support them in whatever adventure they want to explore. And that was, for years, that was my come from. And I was mediocre at it. Like, I was attempting to do that. And then I was pretty fractured. I was like doing all my work here, running, doing this work, and then trying to be open-hearted, but you could see through my strained face, like, oh yes, I'm so happy for you. And you could see that I was like in this parts conflict.
I might know something about that.
So that, for many years, that was like my way of being, and it was incongruent. There's an incongruency in me. And it was huge and beautiful when I got to a place where I could actually, like, own my jealousy, share that I'm threatened, have conscious other metamors with whom I could share, hey, look, this is hard for me. This is a stretch for me. And to actually get some compassion and understanding for that. And we all agree that we're trying to love openly in a culture that makes this, and a culture and a history that makes it really hard. We're going against the mainstream. We're going, upstream to love this way. And once I, found people who could, like, hold for that and give permission to that and understanding of that, and it made the journey a lot less lonely and impossible. And I would say when at the time in my life, because I met you 10 years into my marriage, Michael and I had been, first 5 years was just challenging as fuck. The next 5 years, it's like, oh, cool, we found a flow. We've got conscious communication, a lot of it due to nonviolent communication, like really using feelings and needs as part of our vocabulary. And so we came into partnership with you in a way that was already like, okay, we're being really authentic, honest, transparent, and this is fucking hard, and and it's going to be crunchy, and like, are you in for the crunch of it? And you were like all in for the deep process that we were in, and all in to do that on camera.
Oh, what was she thinking?
Yeah. And I'm curious, what like, as you with hindsight look back on that, like what was that like? Because that was your first. I'm under the impression that I was really your first metamor that you were in deep relating with.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot happening for me at that time. That was like the most revolutionary time of my life. When I was leaving my corporate job, I was leaving. I had already been on an exploration for about a year around my sexual identity, and if I was more attracted to men or women, and if I wanted to identify more as a lesbian, or then by. So I was in a big turning point and in revealing a lot of parts of me, and also feeling really fed up with and unseen by the culture that I was surrounded by, and how that was expressing itself in my friendships and in the little pockets of communities that I was in. And when the San Diego community that you are a part of, like when I saw that, my heart just like, it was like a knowing. I just knew I've been searching my whole life thus far for this. This is what I know is possible. And when I sat down with you guys and we had conversations, the way that you are communicating and the style of communication, even if I wasn't fully up to par, it sounded like my language. That's what's possible. So there, in that new sight of possibility, there was a part of like, there I was going, I'll do anything for this. This is worth rearranging and leaving my entire life. Like I had left a whole life and said, this is my new life. This is how resonant this is with my heart and my soul's longing for how I want to be expressed in this world.
Yeah, and it is beautiful when we find our tribe, like that experience of like, okay, I know there's something more. And here in San Diego, we had something called the Super Pod, which was really like, over a dozen really committed, intimate, beloveds who were like, let's do life together. Let's do life in a different way together. And then when you came in, it was like, not only a life-changing revolution for you, but also for Michael, my beloved, who until that point in our marriage had never really dared to fall in love to the depths that he did. So it was like a lot of our exploring and experimentation and play with others had been preparation for him to really open his heart in the way that he did. And that then, of course, it ignited two things in me. One is like, oh, this is what we've been preparing for. This is what I want. I want my beloved to really love, not just be on the surface of it. And then simultaneously, the exact opposite set of feelings is like, holy shit, my beloved's really in love. And then whatever threat I perceived before was like 10x, right? So so that intersection for you of knowing, hey, this is where I belong. And for me feeling like, wow, I need even more support, because this is even bigger and deeper than I know where to go. And that put a big strain on our relating, because I think too, and this is really important when somebody's really looking at their metamor style, is um when you're sharing a love, do you want to be intimate with that other lover? Because sometimes that's the glue that bonds everyone together, is like, oh, I'm intimate with my lover's lovers and then I feel included. And sometimes it's also just, now it gets complicated, because now if we're more intimate, there's more to lose, or there's more dynamics, so, and it of course depends on the chemistry and the mutuality of it. But the triadic dynamic that we were in was where you and I emotionally bonded really deep, and
Mm-hmm.
then sexually you and Michael bonded really deep. And it wasn't, it was like we had these different relationships that were at different depths.
Mm,
And it both complicated things, but we also kind of had to do this thing of like, well, what is right relation? What's the truth? The truth is,
mhm,
I think you and I emotionally bonded probably deeper at the time than I was bonded with him, because he was a bit frozen. Um,
mm,
like his so he was had his whole journey as the hinge, because he's now in love with two strong women who are really emotional. And he's like, how do I hold this all together? So
uh,
yeah, it was just for those of you who don't know the whole story, I will complete by saying a year and a half of us living together, sharing a bed, sharing not just that beloved, but a whole intimate network and community and other lovers, and also being on TV created, tensions and stresses that resulted in a nervous breakdown on my part. Like I really fractured uh, emotionally, and then needed to, for my own recovery, take radical space. And so what it looked like was cutting, you, Rachel, out of my life in a way that, like, was devastating for everyone. You then went to Bali and found your Sanghan and Booster, and just a whole next chapter of your life. But it was a devastating split, and what felt like almost even an excommunication
mm,
from this tribe that you felt like you belonged to. And
mm,
so that was a really intense breakdown, which later in years broke through to the friendship that we have now, and the depths
mm,
of
mm,
the depths of dharmic connection that we have now. But certainly when people talk about like the dark night of the soul, like that was mine.
mm. Yeah, and led to one of mine as well, for many reasons. And there's so much richness, and I want to speak to some of it, because I yeah, like one of the pieces for me that I'm really aware of now is in the meeting you, and in um, the way in which you welcomed me in and role modeled for me what it would look like to be the primary partner of in this configuration, like that you were now the person, my beloved's primary partner, and how you role modeled bringing me in. And it was almost like you really instead of like you really pulled me and like welcomed me in such a way that it was a little bit of this like too good to be true, I would say. And I think also put a lot of pressure. I put probably a lot of pressure and expectation on myself to then be the bigness that you were role modeling for me. And what I think is so important about what you've shared here as a different version of being a role model for people is that it took 10 years in this story until Michael fell in love with another woman. and 5 years of really like challenging, like really like going through it. And I want to just name that again, because I heard something similar actually from Sabine and Dieter Doom. They said the first 5 years of their relating was just so tumultuous and just so hard, and then something happens at 5 years for sure. But as like a spectrum of people who have the expectation that they're just going to be in a relationship for a year and then be able to be falling in love with people and it'll all be glorious, and it's like, no, the reality is it does look a lot different.
Yeah, and it is beautiful to have that acknowledged, because at the time that you were coming in and it was your first real poly relationship like this, there was a sense of like, well, you guys had 10 years to figure all this shit out. Like, shouldn't you be okay with, like, don't you have all this experience? Shouldn't you be okay with sharing, and there's a naivete, that
Yeah.
you brought. And it's like, even if I had 20 years, like when I meet someone now, I've never been in a relationship with them. And like every relationship is a new lesson and a new karmic exchange. And like, it doesn't matter how much experience you have, it still can be really challenging and really deep. But that honoring of the primacy is something that is so important in some relationships. And I want to say that I know and honor the whole movement for like in relationship anarchy and the non-hierarchical structures that don't want to, hold relationships as primary or better than or less than. And part of what fucked me up was me wanting not to honor my own primacy. Like me being like, wow, I love this sister and I want to honor the depths of love that you have with Michael, and I'm going to now deny or negate, the status at the time that the two of you fell in love. I stood on a stage with, I think we had 108 people in the audience, and I said, I'm renouncing the title wife. Like, I think that title is not like honoring of it. It had too much primacy in it, and I was renouncing it and letting it go because I wanted to be generous, but it was like being generous was something that was it was too expensive. It took away from something I didn't know I needed, that security in my nervous system. I was too quick to try to give that away. And looking back at all the times and attempts that I tried to deny my primacy, it's almost like a diluted, perverted, like denial of reality. So this has been huge for me and I know this is not, philosophically, that a lot of people can't align with this, but really honoring the foundation and the groundwork and the relational work that has come before anyone. When I enter any relationship, because currently I'm in 2 triads, I have 2 relationships that I'm really interested in, and I want to honor the work that they have done before I come in. And if I do that, if I really see and honor and hold that, there's harmony. And if I deny that, then it feels destabilizing and threatening, to the previously existing relationship.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the clarification, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think for me at that time, in my naivete and my newness, I imagine it was really confusing for me also. I like, as a kind of deer in the headlights, I can, like, if I tune back in, I imagine that's how myself to be like, okay, because it wasn't ever anything I asked for. I wasn't on like in that place. And I think if anything, it was maybe quite confusing for me, of like, well, why don't you want that? Like, why don't you want this? Or what does that mean in a way? And so it hearing you share it now in this way, it I hear truth, and it satisfies a part of me that kind of knew that, I think.
Yeah, and I'll say, even because I believe we spent some time exploring this. This is, of course, our relationship was 10 years ago
10
now.
years ago, yeah.
So it's, you know, like this is a very different version of it. But we spent some time with the conversation of dual primary, right? Like that
Yeah.
was what we were relating as, oh, Michael has, you know, we were playing with this. And you know, I have to say this now because as generously as I wanted to accommodate that, if I'm really honest today, I don't see dual primaries working. You know, so
Mm.
I'm operating not just on our little experiment, but the thousands of families. Like I'm currently in the active practice as, you know, not just the lead faculty of ISTA, but all around the world, working with couples and families in like non-conventional configurations. And the dual primary idea is an idea that creates a kind of it's you know, it's like there's a friction and a temporariness to it. It's often like a transition from one primary to another, but to sustainably have two primaries is really challenging to the nervous system, which may biologically still be wired to pair bond. And it may be that, and I played with this, you know, Roxanne was my sexual primary and Michael was my, you know, like co-parenting primary, and you know, and I had another emotional primary. Like there's that idea of different people meet me in different ways, but ultimately with whom do you have that attunement, that if you're in a car accident, you know, and you're calling one person, who's that person, you know? And it's at a really deep survival primal level, that I find that people trying to have dual primaries, there's a lot of destabilizing aspects to it. And I'm by all means like have the ideal of being, you know, like I'm married to my community, and you know, like it doesn't have to be one person, and married to the, you know, solo primary is a beautiful concept, but the dual primary quality, when I see it, can be very destabilized. And I had this debate with a number of other experts, so many of whom are like, hey, it works, you know, historically we see it when there's two male primaries for a female body, but two female primaries for a male body hasn't played out very well. In fact, we kind of joke, there's a word in China, you know, when a man has two wives, there's a word for it in Chinese, and it translates to hell.
Well, I can attest for the other side as well, because that's a little bit of my story right now, is coming from a dual primary with two men that was completely destabilizing in every which was, at first it was like, oh my God, I've never been so happy in my life. This is it. Like, this is all of me. I don't need anything else. I'm not interested in anyone else. I have my, like, these parts of me here and these parts of me here. And just being between these two men and building life with them is perfect. And then just like as soon as we reached some kind of peak of perfection for the way that my heart felt, the whole cookie started to crumble. And that's a little bit of the destabilization that I'm still trying to find my footing in. So I have the hell realms also in the other sense.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about, you know, knowing your your beloved, and knowing your constellation, like I want to acknowledge how many shared values, you know, the reason that it has worked for the times that it does, you know, is because, hey, we share the values of authenticity and honesty, and you know, sharing the value for freedom, as well as, you know, trust. And like systems work best when we're all clear on those like meta intentions, and so if we're really having a deep dive into like what makes metamor relationships work, it's when metamors share the same values. And if they have different values, then you're in that constant struggle. And there's times when you're moving with partners and everyone's got shared values, and then one person on their soul's path starts to evolve and they have a different value that's pulling them stronger, deeper in a different direction, and we outgrow each other. But I think it's so important to do the self-work and look inside and say, what really matters to me?
Mm.
What really matters to me is the same as what matters to my partner and my partner's partner, then we can all be on the same team and work together. But if what really matters to me is the opposite or seemingly mutually exclusive with what really matters to my partner's partner, now there's going to be friction.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that too. I can attest to that. And I think that was a little bit like, for example, just Leonard and I having a child and going into now being co-parents and everything in our world revolving around being parents. And meanwhile, Booster getting more freedom in his life because he didn't have such an focused primary partnership with me, but now he got more space. Then all of a sudden his value became exploration and sexuality and exploring himself and freedom. And so those two, like where he's at in his journey and simply because we have a child, have now carved a bigger there's a bigger space there.
Yeah.
And the question is how to stay in connection, with that. Like, can we continue to build family and life? And with that, those different needs and different value systems that aren't as aligned now as they were a year or so ago.
Yeah. And it takes me back to the guiding words of Deborah Taj Anapol. So one of my deepest mentors on the poly path pointed out, and this was during the 5 years that Michael and I were in our struggle, and part of the struggle was as a, at the time I consider myself pansexual, but before it was bisexual. I was like, I want a woman and a man. Like that was what I was looking for. And we were like trying to find that unicorn that completed our triad, and Deborah Taj Anapol's like, it's not about the form, it's not the triad or the, hinge or the, like all of this polygeometry. It's about the love. And when we focus on the love, the form is and secondary to that, like, oh, let's create a constellation around love. And if the love that's moving through Booster looks like, love, what love does through him is sexually adventurously exploring this, and what love does through Leonard and Rachel right now is parenting. And then if we still follow the love and we're all just like following the love, then it works out. If we're trying to create a form, the love starts to feel trapped in something that is not authentic. And so in my recent remarriage, and even now that Michael and I are approaching our 20 year and we're looking at upgrading our vows, a big part of what we're committed to is doing what love does and putting that at the center of our marriage. It's like, that's what we're here for, is to do what love does. And that may take us closer to each other, that may take us farther, but we're following love and we're married in that shared value for doing what love does.
I find myself getting off topic, and I kind of want to go with it because I'm like, oh, we have to keep talking about metamors, because I really we'll see if we come back there, if it blends back in. But what I am selfishly more drawn to pull out of you is I love the way you are a visionary, and I love also the way you're connected to like right now and what's happening here on this planet and what's happened in the past. And I'm curious about your like vision of love. Like what does love and relating look like in the future, or where are we, and bringing back this theme of evolution and the evolutionary potential in our relating. Like what are we currently navigating, and where are we moving?
I am so in awe of the planetary trial, and it's like we're in this training module in this current moment. Like I see the critical mass, like the kind of place where we got to where it's like something's got to break. This isn't working. All the systems are kind of failing. And then with the pandemic, there's a total halt on touch and travel, things that are so near and dear to my values, and to me, like, we're here to connect. And part of what travel gives us is a way of like going beyond the borders and connecting with humanity. And all of a sudden, we're regionally locked down a lot more than before, and then we're cut off from even connecting with the store clerk. So there's a immense reset that's putting everybody face to face with what really matters. And it's beautiful because we're also envisioning, like, oh, if we don't want to go back to what was, like, this is a moment to look at, well, what's possible? How do we continue to connect? And ironically, the pandemic makes us realize that through breath and through being, that we are all connected, and whether we want to be or not, we're all connected. What we do affects everyone. So really what this says about love, is it's a deeper reclaiming of what life wants to do through us. Like I feel, especially because the pandemic is like a death rite or ritual, or a death initiation at the global level, that we're starting to look at what's life for. Life is really precious. We're losing so many, like millions of people. We're losing people. And then those of us that are, like, there's a deeper responsibility to like live on purpose, right? And so with that, with the initial initiation, I think life is asking us to love like bigger and truer, and to stay closer to what we're here for. And there's also a deep sense, my son was just actually pointing out, he's like, when did gay marriage get legalized? And I was like, 2015. Like, it's just so recent. Like, there's a deep sense of planetary waking up to love is love. And now with the trans, it feels like there's a emergence of trans culture and acceptance, in the face of all the opposite as well. But what's coming through in this critical time is a clarification of what are we really here for. And life coming through those of us, like, wants us to be who we are, wants us to be ourselves, and to love in a way that's authentic to what's true for us. And then how do we do that in synergy, like in harmony? So in terms of the emergence, the, like, really what's coming through is a stronger, clearer connection to soul and soul purpose, and how closely related that is to how we love. That our soul purpose is also connected. You can't be in soul if you're not allowing yourself to love in the most authentic, biggest way. And that takes us into a great mystery of, like, and we don't know what that looks like, because we're breaking through structures of personality and programming and old ways of being. So the emergent new way is just revealing itself. And I would say what it's asking of all of us is to listen to listen deeper, to listen with a more open heart, and to be open to, being surprised, be open to what the unknown, what we don't yet know, because what we know is what hasn't worked. So now we're in this place of what's next, and we will miss it if we try to fill it with our ideas and our, concepts. But if we slow down and really listen, then love's going to emerge and show us. And in fact, listening and loving, they're so close. Like listening is so close to loving. Like I don't know the difference really. It's just being with, what's revealing, being with what is, and not resisting it, and not trying to, interpret, overthink, make meaning where there is none. Like listening and embracing that.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's really interesting because there's a lot of themes that have come through in the Evolve Fest that we were just in, and you just basically kind of wove them all through together, which is really magical. So there is a collective resonance and frequency that I'm really enjoying.
And the Evolve Fest it's such an important, it's an example of an important process. As we're emerging, we need to mastermind, we need to come together, we need to further the conversation, we need to just be present with each other and what needs to be processed so that we can be available for what love wants to do through us. So really thank you, like genuinely thank you, the courage and the immense work that it takes to bring everyone together and have these forums. But it's not just, it's necessary. It's like almost like this is the essential groundwork that we need to do to get beyond ourselves and see what's possible.
Yeah, exactly. That is where this is born from as well, especially for me in this time of becoming a new mother and, now being home visiting family and seeing what was through the version of my mother and then my grandmother who's still alive, and now seeing Lilith here and just looking at my lineage and wanting to be more conscious around how I'm raising my child and what I'm passing down to her, and allowing her to be that like evolutionary potential that of where I've come to in my soul's emergence or exploration. It's a very special thing that happens when you become a parent that you've also named before, in a way for me to start caring in it. Like conceptually, I thought I cared about the planet and humanity, and it's just a different shift that happens.
Yeah.
I'm feeling also in listening to you and your sharing, I'm feeling really lucky. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like I got my first real, like deep love, polyamory, metamor experience, to be this woman, to be this incredible woman. Like, oh my God. Like, I don't think anyone ever, I don't know if there's many other women that have come in that have loved Michael and that you've initiated in the way that you have me. I think I have a really, somewhere in some karmic past life, I did something really fabulous to have ended up in the place where this was my initiatory. If you would have told me that 9 years when you kicked me out of the house, I probably was singing a very different tune. But today, I feel much different. Yeah, I'm very grateful and lucky.
It's mutual. And I want to just, I want to share the impulse that came up as you were saying, I must have done something amazing in my past life. And it's like, no, what you're doing is amazing in the future. Like the work that you're doing, this Evolve Fest and your Dharma, like the way that you come alive and started giving back to the world and like furthered these conversations, I see who you're becoming and what you're doing for Lilith and her generation. And I'm like, that's the pay it forward. Like, you are doing good work. We all are. It feels really beautiful to have you, dharmically, like, I sense at a deep level that we're in this together.
Mm.
And one of my greatest gratitudes is being a part of a global community that's waking up, and there's a leadership that's happening where, we do the work on ourselves so that we can give to the future. And yeah, I want to just thank you and, those people who are listening for like showing up for the bigger conversation.
Mm.
And we're not alone, even though we feel like it behind our screens sometimes. Like, we're part of this really immense awakening.
Mm. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's really sweet. Thank you for the reminder of that. It can feel, I was sharing, I think, with Bruce the other day when we were talking, that I'm back in America now, that I haven't been here for a while, and I've been in my like little bubble of my community in Europe and what we're all doing together. And then I come back to America and it's like, whoa, okay, like culture shock. Coming home is culture shock, to see like where I, and also really empathetically think like, wow, I get why I do what I'm doing on a completely new level, like this, of just being with my family and the conversations and the dialogue with children. It's like, oh wow, like I can feel my nervous system picking up, I can feel the tension, I can feel my body contracting. Like, all of this were the same responses I was having as a child, and I didn't know what that was or how to work with it, and it just led to me feeling isolated and alone and like I didn't belong. And so I went on this, quest, and to be back here now and to be sitting in such a different seat is really illuminating.
Mm.
And yeah, just peaceful in a way.
Mm. To close out the topic of metamors, what touches me in what we're sharing is the kind of love, when we have a dyadic love, the whole universe is created between two people. And then when we actually share, like, our beloved loves someone else, and yes, they have their whole universe between them, but there's a way in which nobody else understands what it's like to love that person but that other metamor. And there's
Mm,
something so immense when we can actually get past the ego's need to be the only or the special or whatever, and we can get to like, wow, I share with this person what it means to love this other unique soul. And that shared like experience is actually uh it's so, it can expand our love and make it transpersonal. It's a little
mm,
bit closer to how God loves, is like
mm,
when we can love that person and know that others love them, then it's like we can start to love, through the one, we can start to love everyone.
mm-hmm,
And so I genuinely want to say that the practice of, whether it's communicating or just from a distance blessing and, and celebrating other lovers loves, that is actually a spiritual practice towards, that can get us closer to God, get us closer to the experience of loving all of humanity. So
mm,
as a practice, it's a well worth, like, meditation. And then when we put it in beyond the thoughts and the blessings, when we put it into actual relating, it can ground into our bodies in a really deep imprint for a very big love. So I want to, yeah, just celebrate uh how all of my lovers have taught me to love bigger, and in gratitude
mm,
for that.
mm. Oh, thank you. I think that was the closing. I don't think there's anything else I could possibly say right now, other than I'm really touched and honored that you joined me for our first our first real live interview publicly, I think, since I was with you in San Diego.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else that you want to share, if someone's just getting to know you right now and they want to journey with you, or they're curious to have you support them or to learn more from you, how would someone do that?
KamalaDevi.com has all of my everything that you need. So particularly I have a newsletter that I'd love to stay in touch with you and offer you free gifts and videos if you sign up at KamalaDevi.com. And then in my heart of hearts, what I love doing is mentoring leaders. And if you're a healer, a teacher, a practitioner, or a facilitator, then and want to do some deep work with me, then let's set up a discovery session to see if we're a fit, because that's the work that's really alive for me right now. And I've loved meeting with you again, Rachel. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too. Thank you all for tuning back in, and curious to hear how this really inspiring talk has landed. If you want to share some comments in the chat. Yeah, and we'll see you again sometime soon.